right, let's call this meeting together. This is the February 11th, 2019 school board meeting of Independent School District number 283. First item on our agenda is approval of the agenda, so let me just review that quickly. On our agenda is the superintendent's report. Then we have several study session topics. Those include a bid award, high school construction project, Westwood Lutheran Church land access request, strategic plan report, strategy 4 start times, school board appointments to city commissions, policy development first reading, policies 550, distribution of announcements and other information, policy 705, investments, policy 707, transportation of public school students. Then we have policy development second reading of policy 514, bullying, prohibition, and 522, student sex non-discrimination. After that, we have the consent agenda, followed by the action agenda. On the action agenda, we have the principal contract 2017-2019, the bid award for the high school construction project, school board appointment to city commission, and policy development second reading, policies 514, bullying, prohibition, and 522, student sex non-discrimination, followed by communication and transmittals and adjournment. Do I have a motion? Moved by Karen. Is there a second? Seconded by Ken. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The agenda carries 7-0. So first up on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
All right. Well, good evening, Chair Gores, members of the board. This evening for my report, I would like to share some information connected to our district mission. Specifically, I would like to look at a couple of examples where our staff and community are providing students multiple pathways to excellence. This past, on Saturday, I had the opportunity to attend Susical Kids, the Aquila Elementary Theater Arts Program's performance. And I was just ecstatic to see so many Aquila students not only engaging but thriving in the theater arts. I would like to just take this moment to congratulate all of the students who participated in the performance and give a special thanks to the Susical Kids directors, Rachel Hahn and Grant Nelson. It was a great opportunity, and I had the chance to spend some time with my 6-year-old there who just loved the performance. So thank you, Aquila Arts Program. The next example of multiple pathways to excellence is our esports program at the high school. Recently, Care 11 recognized our esports team. Ryan Shaver from Care 11 Sports featured St. Louis Park High School's esports program. And this team includes between 40 and 50 students and is coached by Jake Utites at the high school. And the last way I would like to just share a little bit about providing multiple pathways for our students here is our Career Pathways program. And specifically, I would like to take this moment to thank all of the community members and staff that participate on our Career Pathways Advisory Board. This board works collaboratively to assist and support our Career Pathway program. Specifically, this group works on, looking at different workforce development opportunities for our students, work readiness skills, internships, establishing program standards, curriculum review in program areas, and connecting our students to experiential learning opportunities, be it field trips, guest speakers, career fairs, internships, mentoring, etc. And I would like to specifically thank Kara Mueller and Carrie Jennison for all of their leadership with the Career Pathways program. And the example that you see in front of you is just a picture of Trevor Paulson's construction class, which continually trying to provide our students with real-life career opportunities. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is our first study session topic. That's the bid award high school construction project. Tom Bravo, Manager Facilities, will present.
Thank you, Chair Board Gores, Superintendent Osai, and school board members. We went out for bid for the high school project. We only went out for bid for the first part of 2019 because we initially went out for bid for the whole project, and it didn't come back favorably for us just because of the fact that it's such a big project with so many years that there was unknowns. So we decided to break it off and go out for a rebid for just 2019, which we got better numbers when we did the 2019 part of it, just because people understood the scope. They knew that there's going to be a start and end time, and there wasn't unknowns and so forth. But we do have some challenges going forward after this year that I'd like to explain to you at a later time. So along with that, we the bids that we received were from Kraus Anderson as a construction manager. The actual bids were $9.2 million, $9,194,077.55, believe it or not. And what we did was our estimates with the projects that went out for bid, the locker room project, the old district office renovation finally, and then we decided to, at this time, because of what we're hearing for the market, to purchase the 800-ton cooling units for the high school now versus waiting until 2 or 3 years from now, just because the pricing was in our favor. So with that, we will be taking some deferred maintenance money out of our referendum and deferred maintenance to pay for the difference of the 800-ton unit right now versus later. So with that, we ended up under our actual bid results. And I wanted to explain also that why we go through this bids, we're still looking at how we can engage the small business enterprise, the minority business enterprise, and the women business enterprise. And so with the help of Kraus Anderson, which I think I gave them just great cheers on it, we are at 26% participant in SBE, WBE, and MBE. And that's a lot more than most cities do, and that's a lot more than other districts do. So we're very proud that we're engaging that type of workforce, because that's the workforce that we really want to let people know that we're talking to them and making sure they get involved. Also, 86% of our subcontractors for this project are union and 14% are non-union, and usually the non-union ones are the ones that are not union, don't have a union, like some floor finishes or some millwork or something like that, that truly is not a unionized type organization. So in the attachments, of course, you're going to see the letters from the architects. You'll see Kraus Anderson's letter to say that the numbers are great and that we would like to get approval for this project to move ahead. And we would like to start this project, believe it or not, April 1st in the high school. Any questions?
So in going out and purchasing the 800-ton refrigeration unit, is that just to purchase it, hold it off to the side, and put it in when?
No, we're going to install it because the locker room's going to need it, but we're going to be doing more than prepare for the kitchen project, the Lincoln Learning Project, and so forth. So this one was going to be, we were hoping to wait on this, but because, again, pricing was better now, we decided to go now and build a pad and build a unit. And as we do the other projects, we're just going to tap into it.
So the metric on the minority or women-led organizations, is that based on the number of bids or the number of successful bids or the amount, or how does that work?
It's a number of successful bids that meet the qualification that Kraus Anderson keeps tally for. So that example would be, maybe can you give me one women organization that's in the project? Do you remember of any? This is Rob from Kraus Anderson. I put him on the spot. Sorry. So there's as the bids come in and they're the most qualified, lowest bidder, then we look at what type of organization they are, and the 26% comprised of minority vendor or a women-owned business vendor or a small business vendor, maybe localized here that they're buying products from them or things like that. So that's how the 26%. So it's really 1/4 of what the bids are in, and we're very proud of that. Yep, it was 5 out of 19 that met that qualification, and a pretty stringent qualification. So we're very proud of that. Does that answer your question, or maybe not?
Yeah, I just didn't know if that 26 was, what that was a percent of, if it was, like I said, if it was of the overall bids or the successful bids, or if it was based on the amount of the bid, it was 26% of that amount. So I was just trying to get clarification on which.
So there's 19 categories from mechanical, electrical, low voltage, so forth. Of those, 5 or 6 of them met this qualification.
Thank you.
So that doesn't necessarily mean that we actually hired them. It just means that they qualified to be hired.
They're going to be part of the team.
Oh, they are part of the team.
Mhm.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Good clarification, Ken. So my question is, if we're going to start April 1st, school is still in session for a couple of months, how disruptive, if at all, will starting construction during the school year be to the educational process for our students? And how do we minimize that if there's any disruption?
So when we started doing this, we really looked at that because that was a big question that we brought up, saying, how do we not stop school from happening? And so because the locker room area, that's a new semester in that area, the PE, Andy Ewald, and everybody else agreed that we can start that and they could still have their programs going on with an auxiliary area that they could do they could change and everything else. And because it's located in an area that we can close off the hallways on all ends, it won't interrupt any services in those areas. And if the noise itself, because of the barriers we're putting up, it shouldn't be noisy, but if it is, we've given the principal the right to call us and say, hey, there's testing going on, B135 for 3 hours, shut down. And we have that ability to do that right now. So I think we planned it all out, hopefully. And most of the work, when we talked about this, will be done during spring break here. So they're gonna go like gangbusters in demolition during spring break. So a lot of the noise was when no one's around anyways. That's the plan.
Tom, I really appreciate your work on that and focus on that. I went to law school in a construction zone for a year, and it's very disruptive if you don't manage it well.
Oh, thanks.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You don't have to go far because you're next up. We have a Westwood Lutheran Church land access request, and it's going to be presented by Tom Bravo, again, our facilities manager.
Yes, I just wanted to share with you, and I don't know if we have a slide on this one, do we? Yeah. Share with you is that there is a request by a church group that and it's still way in the pre-planning stages, that they would like to look at the possibilities of building a road along the side of 169, and so between 169 and our building for a road access if this project was to ever evolve into the next levels or so forth. So today's discussion is just kind of share with you what their thoughts are and what we want to just kind of show you as to go with their request. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add to it, Superintendent?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So as you can see in the image in front of you, there is a proposed vehicle access point that is located between Cedar Manor School and 169, so on the west side of the building. And Tom and I have been meeting with representatives from Westwood for several months, and what I have and what Tom has expressed as a significant concern is that where you see the roadway letting out into what is titled as the parent drop and pickup, or affectionately known as the kiss and ride area of the school, I have significant current concerns about that, because that is, at this point, being that we have not been there from a PSI standpoint, we anticipate that that entire area will be full with parents and students dropping off and picking up each day, and letting out, right now we don't know how many cars would need to access this roadway in and out of that parking lot. It presents potential dangers for our students and staff. So at this time we've communicated that with the church, and I know the church is currently considering revising their request and looking at a potential modified entrance so that they're not letting out in the parking lot. But as I've shared with them, that as long as it lets out in the parking lot, I have significant concerns about that.
And I second that.
So when I'm looking at that space and that roadway, it's right next to our small child playground, that dotted oval. That just does not look like enough room for a buffer if there were an accident, even if you'd have a fence in between the roadway and the screening trees. I just have some grave concerns about the safety of our children with trying to cram in cars, because that's not going to be a one-way road. That would be a two-way road, right? Cars
Correct.
in each direction.
Correct.
And I'm just really going to express grave concern about the tiny amount of space as a buffer with the playground right there.
Yes. We again, there, as the superintendent said, we do have some requests back to the church, even though, again, this is way preliminary, that there's things that they need to correct and bring back before we even talk about it even extensively.
First, I've actually talked to a couple of people from Westwood, and so I know a little bit about their plans, and I would just like to start off by saying how excited I am that there is a group of people who's working to find ways to put more affordable housing in St. Louis Park. And in theory, I actually really love the idea of it being close to one of our schools. That helps create community, and I love that. That being said, I share some concerns. A few of them that I would like to highlight specifically at this point. Like Superintendent Osai said, that entryway, that access to the road, frankly, it's a no-go for me. I was actually hit by a car when I was in school on my way to the school bus. Literally, I was walking across the street to the school bus, and it was a pretty significant injury. And I'm just looking at this map, and I'm imagining all of the ways that our kids could get hurt. Going to and from the building. So that makes me very uncomfortable. I share Karen's concerns about the proximity from our playground to that road. There's accidents, there's people being intentionally silly, lots of ways for potential issues there as well. And then the third concern I have is, and you can answer this question, is the land that the road is currently, the proposed road would be on, is that district land?
Correct. Yes, it is.
So we would be giving them our land?
I don't think that was even agreed upon or non-agreed upon right now. Again, because
Of course, but that would be the idea, is that we would sacrifice, or we would lose, however the deal is worked out, we would lose some of our land.
correct.
Chair Gores. I would guess that with the request from the church is that we would, as a part of a partnership, that we would donate the land. So that is the request.
Okay.
But from a school district standpoint, there's not been any conversation to that.
No.
To that.
Well, I think regardless of the way by which we would be asked to be giving up that land, I would have concerns about losing it for our future, for additional future. I mean, we're talking about bids in one conversation for big construction projects, and then the next conversation we're trying to imagine how we may want to be using our land in the future, and losing a variety of options for this building to do that. And I would hate to, we are stewards of the district property as school board members, and I, at this point, would feel very uncomfortable losing some possibilities and losing some opportunities on that land.
In the conversations that they're having to revamp some of this, are they thinking about taking it out the opposite way through the neighborhood instead of having the road on our school property? I see there are some concerns on ease and land restriction, but the city can make compensations for that, right?
When they proposed, they did propose looking at a few options. And this is one of the options that I think they would like to see. And not to say that the city would like to see something differently or we would, it's what they would like to see.
I just wanted to ask a sort of clarifying question. This particular schematic came from the proposal by the organization that's proposing it, not from us. And that it says Cunningham. The reason why I asked that is that it says Cunningham on it, and we're also using Cunningham for our big project. We had it actually earlier in our board book, so I just want to make sure that we're clear on where things are coming from here.
Yes, we have no contract or relationship with that Cunningham Group. Cunningham Group is comprised of several entities. One of them is low housing, which we don't deal with that part of it. The Cunningham Group that we deal with is the educational piece, and then they have a healthcare piece, and then they have a gambling piece or casino piece, I guess. So they have multiple pieces. So this, when we saw this also, we asked the question, and that's when they explained to me there's different entities within the Cunningham Group. So we don't have any dealings with this one.
You know, Tom, I was at PSI's it's PTO now, they've changed names, and heard a presentation on this, and so I want to echo concerns that I have, and I don't know that we're going to get over them. I just don't want to create any false hope, but it's preliminary. So I just want to kind of put some concerns out there, echoing everyone that I've heard. But you know, I, as a fiduciary duty to this district, I don't envision giving land away, particularly land that's that close to a building where we might at some point need to expand the building, and we've then foreclosed our options. I don't think that would be wise, being a wise steward. I heard the possibility of access from the north, from the other direction to the proposal. What I heard, and I don't pretend to know the details, was there was some concern about cost of a needed bridge to go over a low area. You know, I don't know what that cost factor is. I don't know how they're going to finance it. I don't know if that's solvable. I don't know if the request to us looks better because they think we're going to give them land that I don't think we're going to. But I just want to say there are other options from the north. Whether they're feasible or not is not ours to know. But
Correct.
I know that that's been discussed. I have the same major safety concerns and traffic concerns for how that kind of a road is going to exit out into Cedar Lake Road there and not create a huge traffic issue. I mean, I'm not a development guru, but my memory is you usually have, you know, you're able to do some road counts and, you know, see what the traffic flow is and make some informed judgments based on what's happening in real time. And without PSI even being in that building yet, we just don't, I don't think we know enough to in any way say that this is okay, no matter how you restructure it, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
I just think we need to live there for a while before we'd even have a reality check. Part of our mission is keeping our kids safe. So I just want to voice my major concerns about that.
Thank you.
I really agree with that. Thank you for saying that. Mary, I want to echo what you said about that there's a real clear need for more affordable housing in St. Louis Park, and we don't want to ignore that fact. But that right now, we don't know what this site is going to look like a year from now and 2 years from now. And so it's just impossible for us to imagine a way to safely do this or safely recommend it, I think, without knowing what the site is going to look like. So right now, I would not be in support of that.
Anybody else want to comment at all?
I'll just say I'm aligned with what's been said. I'd be repeating others, but I'm aligned with the concern.
All right, thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the heads up.
Okay, thank you.
So next up, we have our strategic plan report, strategy number 4, start times, and that'll be presented by Sarah Thompson, our Director of Communications and Community Relations.
Thank you, Chair Gores, Superintendent Osai, members of the board. I'm happy to be here tonight to give you an update on where we are in the school start and end times project. As you know, we've been meeting since November. We just completed meeting number 3 of a 4-set meeting. And so I'm here tonight to bring you along and share some information with you about what we've learned in our process. So just to start with some history of how we got here and where we're at right now. Our strategic plan calls for a strategy 4 entirely around facilities, and that's how we had a facilities plan, very successful referendum, and now some of the bids and things you've heard about tonight already. We're improving our facilities. But also within strategy 4, it calls us to look at our school start and end times, and that is where this study was born. At the same time that was happening, we also were hearing parent concerns, and this was coming from elementary, middle, and high school parents. So all grade levels were having some concerns about start times. And so with that, we dove into the academic research, best practice from other districts like us, and said, okay, what should we be looking at here? How should we do this work? And so we formed a project team and are diving into the work. This is the charge statement of the group. It's long, but most importantly, I want to call out that it's really tasked with determining the best schedule for the health, the academic, the social, developmental needs of all students. And that's really the core of what we're about, keeping in mind the needs of families, before and after school care, activities, both school activities and outside of school activities, and always being budget minded. As you mentioned tonight, it's important that we're good fiscal stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. Here's where we are in the timeline. So as I said, we started our work in November, have had a couple different meetings. We spent the month of January gathering input, and I'll talk a little bit more in depth about that tonight. Then we had a meeting just last week where we developed options, and so I will have some options to show you tonight. And now we will spend the rest of the month gathering feedback on the options. So just today, the superintendent was out with a couple different groups. Lisa Green was with a group tonight before the board meeting, talking about the options and getting some feedback. So let's dive a little bit into the January input summary. And important to note for those in the room and those watching at home, all of this documentation is on our website. So if you are in need of some light reading, there's about a 40-plus page report of every comment we received in the input phase. You can take a deeper dive into that if you'd like. So I'm gonna hit the high level instead, because I know that people, I'm guessing, want to go home at some point tonight. This isn't a filibuster. So we did 22 input meetings, 6 student groups, 7 staff groups, 7 parent groups, and 2 public meetings. We did have to cancel one of our public meetings, courtesy of Mother Nature and the very cold temperatures. So at all of these meetings, we asked the same 2 questions. So what should the team consider as they develop the school start and end time recommendations, and how should we use the information? So this is driving towards what information should be valued at a different level. What information is most important? I'm trying to drill down into some hierarchy of importance. And I've categorized the information in 3 chunks for you. So I went with elementary schools, students, parents, and teachers, and then the secondary schools. So you can kind of see here, we took just the most popular comments. And so you can see here, across the board, people want us to pay attention to research. It's really important. It's not a typo to say that students at the elementary schools would like to start later and end earlier. They were very intentional about that. I was at 3 elementary schools myself, and the first time I'm like, excuse me, do you mean? And they're like, no, we really do mean we want to come later and we want to go home sooner. So they were very intentional and wanted to be sure that I shared that with you. So, but they also were very wise, even in their young years, to say, it's really important that this works for my family. And they had some very poignant stories of, my brother's in middle school, and we have to get up really early so we can have breakfast and he can get on the bus. And so they had some really good family stories of how this impacts them and what this means to them. And so, as always, just wise beyond their years. Elementary parents had some concerns around busing, and PSI parents in particular, who currently ride the bus with high school students, were concerned about riding it with middle school students, and so that came up repeatedly. Activities were just a wondering of how does that work as we put this all together. It's a puzzle. Teachers at the elementary school felt it was really important that the children come first and not the budget. So they would advise you that to think about our students first and not our budget. And they had some recommendations on exactly how you should do the work. Please note we didn't ask for recommendations, but we came back with some recommendations. And they recommended that the elementary students start first. Academic research tells us that younger students are awake and they're ready to go, and elementary teachers echoed that statement of they're ready to go. At the middle school level, you'll see some similarities here. Refer to the research, refer to the research, refer to the research. That's a common thread all the way through. Students at the middle school said that the elementary should start first and not the middle school. They believe that the 7:33 time is far too early, and they would like us to also think about the full student day. And so activities, bus times, what does their whole day look like? Parents at the middle school wanted us to pay extra attention to the academic or late bus. So this is a bus where all students have an ability to stay after school for some additional time with teachers or participate in an activity and still be bused home. So that was really important to parents. And they also felt strongly that whatever decision was made, as long as the rationale was understood and easily communicated, that they would be supportive. So that was nice to hear early in the process. Staff members really like the early time. So this is an important note because this is different now. Staff members really like the early time. They also feel the academic bus is important, but they also feel that important above all else is that all options consider parent and family. So how does this really fit the whole system of the student? At the high school, we weren't able to talk to high school parents. Again, weather and scheduling got in our way. The one meeting that they had didn't mesh with the rest of us. But we were able to talk to students and teachers, and we were able to do some parent outreach so that they came in on the community side as well. High school students echoed a lot of the survey data that I presented to you a month ago. No change. They really were fine. Thank you very much. Just keep it the way it is from our students. As well as our parents. They like their times. They don't want to go later, which again harkens back to the research. So please don't get us too late in the day. And again, they said, please consider the whole student. And so here at the high school level, the whole student also includes, think about my child because my child has an after-school job. And so now you've got work and then homework. And so the whole student and the whole day looks a little bit different once we get up to the high school level. And so that encapsulates all of the input we received, which, as I said, if you want to do a deeper dive and read comment by comment, it's available up on the website, so you can take a look at that. So now I'm going to turn the page a little bit, and yeah.
Do you want to finish before questions?
I can take some questions now. It's a good place to stop.
Besides me, anybody else want to go first? Yeah, Ann?
On the elementary teachers, I think
Okay.
there was one about wanting all of the elementaries to be at the same time, on the same schedule. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yep, sure. So currently, Aquila, Peter, Hobart, Susan Lindgren have one time, and PSI has a different start time because they are currently on the second tier of buses with the high school. And so it's not great, but it's skewed enough so that when we do professional development on an early release day, they're skewed enough that we have to make accommodations for them to be able to meet together. So if we were going to do a 4th grade math meeting, the PSI teachers would have a hard time flowing into that discussion. And so when they say all, they mean all of the elementaries, all 4.
So would this, and it's been a while since I've had a kid in the 5th grade Math Plus program, so we would have to then eliminate that Math Plus program where we're bringing all of the 5th graders together at PSI for advanced math before the school day starts. Has that been considered?
I think that's about 5 decisions down the road. I think how we would deliver that is the question. I don't think it's a question of is it a yes or is it a no? It's a how. So with every system change, there are unintended consequences. And that would be one of them that we would need to say, okay, so that we do this and it helps us over here. Here are the 6 things, one of them being 5 plus math, that now is broken, and we got to figure out how to bring that into the fold.
Still, just on the feedback, which is
Sure.
what we're asking questions about. I have heard some concern from an elementary parent, and maybe not, it may not be unique to those, about the length of the bus ride. This was particularly a PSI parent, but because I don't know, maybe you're going to come to that where there are transfers and longer rides, and how early then, if it's a long 40-minute ride or whatever it's going to be, and then how early does that start, and concerns actually about the impact on, family or sleep. Any other feedback? I know this is a summary, so that's why I just
Yeah,
asked.
so I'll touch that a little bit when I get to options, but a deep dive into that will come when we make our recommendation. Because at that point is when we will have our transportation consultants truly essentially do like a mock routing of, okay, how many buses, how does this work, what do the times really mean? So we're not quite there yet with that. What I can say is that the amount of time on the bus is considered and has been talked about as it relates to transfers. And so I'll address some of that when I get to the options and what they mean.
And the other area I wondered about feedback, and I don't know if it falls under teachers or activities, but is a concern that's been expressed about activities, whether it's the arts or whether it's sports, and the impact changes may have on that. Or does that come later when you get to the options?
It's been kind of a ribbon that's kind of tied through all of it. We've looked at it in research. It came through in data, both in our local survey and in our input phases. We are very fortunate that our committee, our project team, includes Andy Ewald, who is our activities director. And so he's been able to tell us, well, it would look like this, or we would have to compensate in this way. And even when we get to the options tonight, one of them actually is a pathway that we've had before. And so there was an original, oh, we can't possibly do that. And Andy politely raised his hand and said, yes, we can. We used to do it that way. So it's another testament to having the right people in the room so that we can answer the questions and move the work forward. Any other questions on input?
Early on, I thought probably the most likely thing that might happen is that the elementary schools and the middle schools would swap. It seemed like there was some support for that. But now I see there was some opposition. 43% of elementary school parents don't want to start earlier, which is surprising. I'm just wondering if there's any way to kind of get a feel if they might agree they could start a little earlier, if that allows the middle school to start later. Is there any way to kind of get a feel for that kind of trade-off?
Well, that's part of why we're doing February as feedback month. So now we have 4 options that I'll present to you, and we will take those back out to students, parents, staff, and community and say, okay, based on research, based on best practice, based on local survey data, this is what the team came up with as the best ideas. What do you think? What are the pros? What are the cons? What do we need to think about? And so now is that time for parents to weigh in and say, I can't do it. Or, you know what, I think we could figure this out. I think I see the benefits. So now is the time.
I wonder if you just asked by itself if they should start earlier, they'd be opposed, but if they really see the trade-offs, you might get more support for that.
Certainly a consideration.
All right, let's hear the options.
All right, let's hear the options. I feel like I should have a drum roll or, something fancy, right? And again, it's me, so I have to always ground you first. This is what we have currently, right? We have a 3-tier system. Middle school is first, followed by Park Spanish Immersion in the high school, and then the remaining 3 elementary schools, just to ground you in where we are today. And so this is the current tiers as they lay out some benefits. It's efficient, it's familiar. High school is at a later time than it used to be. But we've talked about the challenges of the early time for the middle school, what some perceive as a late time for elementary schools. And our third tier elementary buses oftentimes are delayed, both in the morning and in the afternoon. And so that's what we see right now as some benefits and challenges to our current system. So that's kind of laid our groundwork of where we are. And so we have 4 options for you tonight. And as I said, based on research, best practice, local data, and input, a couple things you won't see tonight, just to be super clear, because I want to set my expectations for you. You're not going to see specific times. And for the reason of, we didn't want people to fully base their feedback on, I have something that I really don't like about 8:22, or I really don't like 7:56. So we worked really hard to not put the times there this time. You're also not going to see budget, and that's purely because the project team met last Monday, and we are out for feedback this Monday. So in 7 days' time, our consultants couldn't pull together 4 full busing routing schemes, as well as our business director, who's fantastic, couldn't do 4 full budgets. So you will get that when we get to a final recommendation, but you won't see that tonight. So I just wanted to let you know. So option square, they're coming to you in shape form. Option square is a 2-tier system that in the middle has a hefty chunk of time for transferring students. And so you see our elementary students, all 4 elementaries, going in tier 1, and our secondary students riding together in tier 2. Now, the mechanics of the transfer time still need to be worked out in terms of where does that happen, how does that happen, is it supervised, how is it supervised, what are the budget implications for that? That's to be worked on. But some of the things we wanted to kind of hear in terms of benefits and challenges. We've got all of our elementary kids together and all of our secondary kids together, and so that's a benefit. Routes are less affected by delays in previous tiers because we only have 2 and we have a big chunk of time in the middle. Some challenges that come with this. Pairing PSI with another elementary school causes the length of the day to change dramatically and causes some transfer challenges. So if you've got students on buses and they're going to 4 schools, if we route them that way, where they go to all 4, it's a long ride. If we divide them in half, then we're back to, potentially an east-west or a north-south split. Challenges there. So there's lots of challenges with how that comes together. We would have some transferring. And so I've heard several people voice many concerns at the project team table about the idea of small elementary children, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, even up to 3rd and 4th grade. The idea that they have to transfer their bus, so they're off one bus and have to walk to another bus, and just cringing at the thought of what that would look like and what that would mean. So the transfer piece here is concerning. And then again, as I mentioned early on, just where would we transfer? What is a safe place to do this kind of work? So those are some benefits and challenges we see.
Sarah, do we, grounding us in our current system?
Yep.
Do we have transfers now?
Small number of transfers, mostly for students who we bus out of the district.
Chair Gores, if I can add, today, as a part of hearing some of that feedback from stakeholders, I know Patricia reached out to our transportation consultant and requested that as they're putting together the parameters, that one of the parameters include not having students on and off buses in order to make this work. So any type of transfer will really be transferring the buses from one site to another, not physically having students get on and off buses. That's one of the parameters that we put in place today, recognizing the potential safety implications.
Thank you, Superintendent Osai. So what that looks like today is with the PSI and high schoolers going together. They pick up the PSI students, then they go to the high school, and they pick up high school students, and they go on their merry way. That's technically considered a transfer, even though the students don't leave the bus, if that's helpful for what it looks like today.
So on this option that you referred to, I think, a healthy chunk of time for transfer time. So is our expectation that transfer time is the same duration as tier 2 of the other options or the current option, or do we think there's a opportunity to condense these 2 tiers to make those start times closer together? Or do we know?
You will notice that I chose the word hefty instead of applying a number. and very intentionally. I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek, but very intentionally of we're looking at the box as a 3-tier system, knowing that the second tier would be transfer time. It's our hope that it can be compressed to give us some more efficiency as well as wiggle room when weather hits, when bus troubles happen, things like that. But yes, there's still a pretty big chunk of time in the middle. What that looks like, we don't know yet. As I said, our transportation folks are trying to figure that out in terms of how we move our buses around to accommodate that.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move on from the square. Next up is the circle. In the circle option, Aquila, Peter Hobart, and Susan Lindgren are on the first tier. Park Spanish Immersion School and the middle school are on the second tier, and the high school is on the third tier. Some benefits to this are that PSI in the middle school, and that this is PSI in its new location in the Cedar Manor site, are closer geographically to each other, and so that creates some efficiencies as we drive around the park. Better use of time due to a shorter length of day at the elementary schools, so we have some additional makeup time, so to speak, in our system. And middle school athletes can easily participate in high school athletics. So currently they have about an hour lag time from when they finish their school day till when the high school finishes their school day. And so with having them tier 2, tier 3, back to back, it creates some efficiencies there. Some challenges to this is that in moving the high school to tier 3, high school athletes may lose some educational time. So competitions where they need to go outside the district and there's a chunk of travel time, they would have to leave school even earlier, is what that means. There's also a potential here that transferring PSI students could lead to a long bus ride for them at those times. So they would have to transfer to get back out to their schools. So that's the circle option. Any questions on this one?
I know you said you don't have actual bus times yet, but with the extra efficiency with the elementaries, you can pick them, you can drive them home earlier. Would the later high school time have to be much later, or do you have any feel for that yet?
We don't have a feel for that yet. Any other questions about the circle? All right, I'm gonna keep going forward. Now we have a triangle. In the triangle option, all 4 elementary schools are together in tier 1. The high school is in the same spot it is now in tier 2, and the middle school goes to tier 3. The benefit here is that the elementary schools are all together on the same tier. It also tells us that the largest number of buses on tier 1 frees up buses later on for athletic practices and competitions. So when we put all of our elementary students on buses, that's more buses than we need middle school and high school, and that's driven by number of parents who drive students to school and students who drive themselves to school. So that's where those numbers are coming from. And so in this option, doing our elementaries together first, they come back and it frees up buses then for middle school and high school practices and competitions. And with this option, a large portion of our students keep relatively close to the same time, by the high school staying tier 2. So some challenges: pairing PSI with another elementary school causes length of day, transfer challenges. Middle school athletes may not be able to participate in high school athletics. May is an important word there. As I said, Andy Ewald is certain that we can pull this off. Apparently we used to do this many years ago. And so he sees a way to make this work. And as we said, some longer bus rides for these students in comparison with the other 3 schools. And this is purely a function of the 4 elementary schools and moving the tiny humans, as I call them, around the district. And because PSI pulls from all over the district, there is a little bit of a transfer involved there in terms of our PSI students. So that's the triangle.
With respect to what you said about the number of kids who do parent drop-off in middle school and high school, I'm wondering if we have gotten any data on whether we may have more middle schoolers riding the bus if we move that start time to a tier 3. Meaning that just from looking at the amount of cars on a drop-off day, I feel like a lot of parents are just dropping their kids off on their way to work, say at 8 a.m. if school is now starting at 8:45, do we know if we could likely see more kids being on the bus? And would that change the number of buses then we might end up needing at those times?
We don't have a data point on that I'm aware of, but what I do know is that we are required to plan and staff our buses accordingly by state law for the students who are allowed to ride the bus. And so whether they come to school on foot, whether they come with a parent, whether they come with a friend, we have to plan our buses so that there's a seat on the bus for them, because we don't know from day to day. It could be, mom or dad's tied up at work, and so they've still got to get home. It's too far to walk, so they need a place on the bus.
Okay, so that it won't impact how many buses we actually schedule?
It shouldn't. No,
Great.
it should not. Any other questions about the tribe? Thank you for staying with me. I've got one more. All right, we're going to go for it. Option Diamond. In this option, Aquila, Peter, Hobart, and Susan Lindgren are on Tier 1. PSI and the high school are on Tier 2, as they are now, and the middle school is on Tier 3. So this is very similar to things you've seen before. PSI and high school students most likely ride together, as they currently do. Better use of time to shorter length of day at the elementary schools. We've got that recovery time again. Every school, except the high school, dramatically changes times, and that's a challenge, just in change management. Middle school athletes may not be able to participate. We talked about that a little bit earlier. And transferring of PSI students could lead to a longer bus ride time in comparison to the other elementary schools. But that's really no different than the current system. So it's something to consider. So those are the 4 options. In your packet was a handout that details them again, so you can go back and refer to them and see the benefits and the challenges. And as we go through the feedback process in February, here are the questions we'll be asking. So those same groups that we met with in January to gather input, we're going to be going back to and visiting in February. And so we'll be asking, what are the benefits of each option? What are the challenges of each option? And then a global question of what are some considerations about the system as a whole that the group should think about. And we'll be asking everybody to complete a feedback form and then do the traditional other ways of gathering feedback that we've done before. We'll have a public meeting, we're doing a Twitter town hall, as well as inviting input on the thought exchange. And so we'll have lots of opportunities for community members to weigh in on this process. And as I mentioned, here they are. So 20 plus sessions. The thought exchange will open up on Valentine's Day, if you'd like to participate. Our Facebook Live meeting with our general meeting is the 21st. Our Twitter town hall is the 28th. Hoping that Mother Nature cooperates with us a little bit more this time. And that is what I have for you tonight. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to do my best.
So when will this options be available on the website?
I haven't been there today, but my colleague put it up this afternoon, so it should be there right now. If not, look for it first thing in the morning.
And this is quite the outlier because currently we don't have funding for it. But what if the state starts mandating preschool, universal preschool? Have we put that possibility in the back of our mind, or are we just not going to worry about that till we have to?
I am going to defer to my other esteemed colleagues on that. Would Superintendent Osai or Ms. Magnuson like to answer that one?
Chair Gores, we've not, that's not something that's been a part of the conversation. We've looked at our current program and services that we're required to offer by law, and at this point, consideration of early childhood or preschool programming for 4-year-olds has not been something that we factored into the current tier system. Chair Gores, may I add one more thing?
Yeah.
I know we'll have plenty of time to acknowledge and thank these individuals when we come back to the board in March to, present the final recommendations to the board. But I just want to take a moment to thank all of the community members, parents, staff, people that have volunteered a significant amount of their time coming together in early evenings to really go through all of the research, the best practice, and have some pretty intense conversations about recommendations. So I'm thankful for their contribution to our students and our staff, and I'm looking forward to their continued collaboration over the next couple of months as we work to bring some recommendations to the board.
So, I don't know, I didn't see do nothing, right, on there? And that's
That is correct.
intentional.
Yep, so the project team brought forward 4 options for feedback, and all of them advocated change. And that was their recommendation. And so, based on all of the factors that I said, they felt that there needed to be a change in St. Louis Park.
Let me ask, because some of my constituents ask, why are we changing? We're accustomed to this, our family has our routine, let's not change. So, thank you.
Yep.
Sarah, and I just don't find the timeline here, and so so I understand we're taking feedback in February, and then, the group is going to reconvene, and you're going to come up with recommendations to us that we will hear in March. And then there'll be time, I'm presuming, for some feedback to those recommendations for the public to kind of, if they choose to, weigh in with us, or are you going back out for more feedback on those
So the way we have it set up
recommendations?
now, Chair Gores, is that we will present a recommendation to you at your first meeting in March. And then after that meeting, there would be additional time for community members to contact you. We can set up, streams for that. And then we're hoping for action then at the second meeting in March, understanding full well that you may need more time, and, it might flow to early April with a plea from district administration for sooner than later, especially now that we know there's going to be a change. We have 5,000 plus students to make a plan to move around the district by August. So there's a little bit of work to be done.
All right, Sarah, thank you for all your good work on this. It's quite a task.
Thanks, everybody.
So next up, we have the school board appointments to city commissions. And just to sort of summarize, the school board has the opportunity to appoint several people to the Park and Recs Commission, and we have a couple of members on there whose terms are going to expire. I think one expires in May of 2019, another one in May of 2020. So we've got, we'll be contacting that person and see how they're doing, see if they want to stay, see if we have other applications, just so the public knows. But we have an opening right now on the Human Rights Commission, and typically that's a 3-year appointment, but this time around, our Superintendent Osai has expressed an interest in being on the Human Rights Commission. He had been interested in doing that even before, I think before he became our superintendent. And when the opportunity arose, he said, "I'd like to do that if you'll have me." And we confirmed that, and and we've confirmed that a couple of times that he really does want to do this. And with that in mind, on the action agenda, there will be a motion to appoint him, but until May 31st of, I believe it's 2020, a 1-year term, because we don't want to overwhelm our superintendent. We want to give him a clear option to say, okay, this has been a great experience, and now it's time for someone else to have this great experience, and he'll be able to, help explain what a wonderful experience it is to others as we try to get good representatives. So did I fairly state our Aston?
I think that was excellent, absolutely, and I appreciate the flexibility of the 1-year commitment to just allow me to confirm my level of interest in the commissions.
Anybody else want to make any comment? Go ahead, Joe.
I certainly support this. I want to backtrack just slightly to the previous topic because I was scrambling around with my calendar. With respect to the start times, we as a school board have a listening session scheduled for March 4th, which is the same date as the last routine meeting for the start dates. So I just didn't know if we wanted to move that date slightly back a little bit. I guess we don't have too much of a window if we're thinking the 4th for the listening session and the 11th for the presentation to the board with a recommendation. Because I was thinking the next listening session should have the opportunity for additional feedback on start time. So, I mean, we could take this offline, but I wanted to bring it up while it's fresh.
Thanks, Joe. I mean, I think it does, and I'll take feedback here. I think it would make sense to move it till after we've had the listening session back, but that might mean we don't get a decision till early April. But that's not too late for you to do all your good work, is it? We can work out the details later. I just am looking for the sense of the board.
I
Yeah, I mean,
wonder-
as long as, yeah, I was thinking, if we push it back, I mean, as long as the staff is able to implement what they need to implement for the next school year, then that seems fine. I mean, that would be my biggest concern about pushing it back.
I would hate to, I don't want us to plan on pushing it back already before we even hear it. We don't know what else may come up. Hopefully it doesn't get more complicated than necessary, but I would like us to be continuing to be kind of on track. I personally still think it works, even if we have a listening session on March 4th. The feedback we're getting is, I mean, we're already getting feedback all the time, right? We're hearing from people, and I think that the recommendations will be somewhat out there. Could we make the recommendations public on the 4th before it's necessarily presented to us on the 11th? Does that make sense? Meaning that here's just what the two options that we're going to present to the board are. I don't know if that makes sense. Trying to think of how to keep the current schedule for the most part
Yeah.
and how it could still work.
So, Vice Chair Tomback, we would be meeting at 4 or 4:30 on the 4th to finalize the options. So I believe your listening session is that night, so we'd be meeting at parallel times.
We'll,
I just want a second. Intend to adhere to this timeline, getting the recommendation on the 11th and possibly making our, having voting on the 25th. Is that the second?
Well, to do that, my suggestion would be that we try to move the listening session to sometime after the 11th, but before the 25th, so that the recommendations are out there, and that if people want to come, they can be heard then, and then we can see where we are on the 25th, and if we're ready to make a decision, we are. If we're not, we can talk with Aston about the time frame and the real drop dead dates. Is there all right, I like that. Move it to the 18th if we can get 2 board members to attend. I will not be one of them. Okay. Do you have somebody else that could attend on the 18th?
I had committed to the 4th. It looks like I can do the 18th.
Okay, let's do that. Let's move the listening session to March 18th, and then we'll, I'll put it on the, I don't think we need to take action on that. Do you?
So same place, same location, is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes, keep everything the same, and just change the date from the 4th to the 18th of March. Right. So, moving on to the policy development phase. First, policy reading 550, distribution of announcements and other information. Let's just take them one at a time. Any comments on that?
Chair Gorse?
Yep.
This policy, as is currently written, certainly supports our current practice. One consideration that I would have for the board is particularly under number 5 of this policy, where it states select the materials from non-school organizations or activities for learners or families which promote the goals of public education or children first. I would just ask the board to just look more closely at specifically calling out children first. And the reason I'm asking for that consideration is that, we have other groups that I would say meets this criteria like STEP, and we're not specifically calling them out. So I would ask the board to consider removing children first specifically, recognizing that, children first would meet this criteria and that we would still communicate information to parents as that supports, activities for learners and families which promote the goals of education.
I support that change. That makes sense. And then I'd also just like to call out, we use ensuring with an IN in a couple of places, one in the first paragraph and one in the second. It should be ensuring with an E.
I want to kind of talk through that number 5 a little bit, just so I have a better, clearer understanding on it. In that if we remove the children first, I kind of feel, and maybe you guys should tell me that I'm wrong, that maybe we should put something in there that we as a school support also, because if you just leave it open, and then almost anybody can send something as long as they believe that it's in alignment with the educational system.
Chair Gores, the reason I made the request was only because I believe there are other organizations, non-school organizations, and I just mentioned one like STEP, and we don't specifically call them out, but yet we send communication out that promotes their events like the Holiday Train or Empty Bowls or other things. So I guess, and I wasn't here in 2015 when this was last revised, so maybe there was some intentionality in putting that there. I just saw it and wondered if it was necessary.
I 100% agree that we should remove that specific one, because others may think that they're not also included, just children first. But I also want to be cautious of not putting ourselves in the position to have to police everything that we, you know what I mean, or am I not? So if we can add something there that could support us as a board or as a school system.
I can perhaps add some context and history to this. So the approval of backpack flyers lived in the communications office for about the last 8 years. And fortunately for me, the last 2 years, my colleague in community education has led the approval process once we went to electronic flyers. The change to add children first predates me, but my understanding of the history of why it was put there was less about naming Children First, the organization, and more about the tenets, the beliefs around putting children first and what Children First stands for. We use it as a measuring stick for what can and can't be shared with our students. I will say that the other pieces of the policy have more bearing for us in terms of we don't allow advertising, we don't allow political communications, things like that. And so they have more leverage, I would say, or weight as we're determining what is and isn't approved to share with our students. I don't know if that helps.
So then those other pieces are in part of the process or the policy of not allowing political bias things?
Yeah, but it says at the bottom of the policy, the district will not distribute through students the following: commercial advertising and political advertising. So, and right now, because Peach Jar, we do charge for Peach Jar, there is a charge for it. So people have to pay $25 per school per flyer to upload something in the Peach Jar. So, and we do have so internally we don't have to do that and that kind of thing. But So they're very kind of picky about what they're going to upload because they have to pay for it. Also, I will always determine if it's a commercial flyer. I always go in and look to see if they have a 501c3 when I see one pop up. But it's not, and political advertising never comes through. I've never seen it. I don't know if Sarah ever has. But you know, there's a thought process, but it's basically people don't really like post for a lot of adult-related things, and unless it's about families, and we don't allow commercial advertising to come through.
Satisfied, thanks.
So it's a first read. I might suggest you might want to touch base with Karen on the children's first piece and get a little history if we don't seem to have it here. Maybe we need to know that by the time we come back to look at this again. Were you saying that everything that we send out is 501c3?
Well, a lot of organizations that do post flyers through our system are 501c3s. They're nonprofit organizations. Mostly what comes through is internal things from the school district, some things from the city, and like from our athletic associations. But occasionally there will be some things that pop in from maybe other cities or other types of organizations that are 501c3s.
All right, let's go on to policy 705, investments.
Chair Gores.
Yep.
So there are a couple of small MSBA recommended changes to this policy. You'll see one under the general statement of policy, and then as you scroll through the policy, you'll also see another change in length of time under reporting requirements, moving from 45 days to 90 days. Patricia Magnuson, our Director of Business Services, has reviewed the policy and suggests that the policy has all of the content of a normal or good investment policy. Between now and the next board meeting, we'll take an even further look and see if there are any additional recommendations we would like to make regarding the policy.
Seeing no other comments, we move on to policy 707, transportation of public school students. Any comments?
Chair Gores?
Yes.
So I'll try to see how I can do this briefly. This is what the additions in red that you'll see in the policy are MSBA recommended additions. But as I added those, I recognize that not all of them currently make sense for us in St. Louis Park. Specifically, I'll just give you an example. On Section 5, transportation of non-resident students, you'll see an added bullet there, D, which talks about providing transportation for students who attend high-need English language learner programs. We don't currently have a high-needs English language learner program in the district, so I'm not sure if that type of policy language is necessary at this time in St. Louis Park. And then you'll see additional language that talks about, even if we go to the next section, Section 6, and I'll just give you these couple of examples and then I'll just create some space for discussion. But you'll see that this talks about transporting students, we're not responsible for transporting any resident student attending school in an adjoining state, for example, right? That has not been something that we've been challenged with before, but that was language added in the most recent MSBA edition.
We mentioned in this policy, or there's reference to the transportation of our homeless students, and I worked on issues of homelessness and youth actually before I became a board member, and so I like to take all opportunities that I can to highlight these issues for folks that may be listening or watching. Despite what you may believe or may have heard, we actually do have many homeless students who attend our schools and who we care for during the day. About 80 or so that we are aware of, but we also know that there are lots of kids who are sleeping on couches and sleeping in buses or in waiting rooms during the night. And so I just Want to spread awareness and make sure folks know that we are attending to the needs of these kids every day the best we can.
All right, seeing no other comments, we'll come back to these policies for a second reading at our next meeting. And now we're up to study session topic F, policy development, second reading, policies 514, bullying prohibition. We'll start with that one.
Under policy 514, there were some recommended changes from board members around language. I think there were a couple of grammatical things, and you should see in this revision that those were corrected. And besides that, there were no other comments for change or correction during the first reading of the policy.
Any other comments? Great. Policy 522, non-sex discrimination, student sex non-discrimination.
Chair Gores, during the first reading, there were no comments or questions or changes requested, so we are presenting the policy as it was presented during the first reading.
I know that we do not comment on procedures generally, but I did just want to share, I was looking through the procedures for 522, and we do still have a reference to an assistant superintendent. So I just want to make sure we caught that so that that can be modified.
We'll get that modified.
Oh, go ahead, Ann.
I just have a comment sort of on the two of these together, just that we haven't said very much. And I want that to not make it seem like these are not extremely important policies. They're really important policies. They're also really good policies. We've looked at them both in the last year. So just while we're not saying a lot about them, that's why I think it's important to point out that they're both reflecting our values as a district, and in particular our core value that everyone has the capacity and responsibility to contribute to the well-being of others. So I think both these policies sort of fit together under that core value, and I wanted to just make sure that was made.
Thank you, Ann. Oh, Rick?
Chair, members of the board, superintendent, one other on the procedures noted, it refers to the issuance of the complaint or grievance, and none of our other policies use that language, so I'll work with the superintendent and revise that to be allegation of violation of this policy instead of the word grievance, which kind of aligns with the union labor contract. Is kind of a term of art there, but not here. And I also noted, I don't know that looking at the procedure, there doesn't look to be a place for a revision date. And so it was adopted in 2015, but we should have a revision date on the procedure.
Thank you. All right. We're up to the consent agenda then. Is there any item on the consent agenda that somebody wants to pull off for discussion? Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Mary. Is there a second? Seconded by Ann. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 7-0. Next up is the action agenda. And first up is the principal contract 2017-2019. I assume, Mr. Cryer, that you're going to do a little summary presentation for us before we...
Chairs, member of the board, superintendent, this is the last contract of our 17-19 negotiation cycle. We, as you know, we bargained with 11 different employee groups, The principals took longer, not because there was contention, just the principals are very busy. It's hard to get their representatives in a room, get everything worked out. I think we have a nice settlement that's within the parameters laid out by the board, and does salary improvement, little change in health insurance, modified some of the things around language about posting vacancies, grievance language. We created a new title for 10-month assistant principals. We looked at that as a new concept that would be more cost effective than having a full year assistant principal, and still get the bang for the buck of having the supervisory position, someone who can do student discipline, expulsions and other things, do teacher observations, and so it's something. We now have a 10-month principal at our high school and at one of our elementary schools as we're working through this.
Go ahead, Karen. Rick, I really want to commend you and your team for working through the contract so diligently. This is starting my 6th year, and you have done an amazing job of getting them streamlined and orderly, and I appreciate that the negotiation is a time-sensitive task, and that you keep them at it. So thank you so much for all that work.
Thank you very much.
All right. It is recommended that the school board approve the labor agreement for principals. Do I have a motion? Moved by Karen. Is there a second? Seconded by Ken. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. Next is the bid award for the high school construction project. It is recommended that the school board approve the bid award for the high school construction project. Is there a motion? Moved by Ken. Is there a second? Seconded by Mary. Any discussion? Yep.
I think it's great that we're moving to 26% of non-common contractors, which is it's a great improvement of things that we were at.
All right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. Next up is the school board appointment to city commissions. It is recommended that Aston Osai be appointed the school district's representative to the City of St. Louis Park's Human Rights Commission until March 31st of 2020. Is there a motion? Moved by Ann. Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. Any discussion? We have a thank you. We have a thank you.
Thank
we have
you.
a thank you.
Thank you not only as representative of our school district, but also as a community member. I think that's an important piece to point out. I know that's something that has interested you since you were just a community member. So thank you again on our behalf.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimously. All right, and next up, it's policy development, second reading, 514 bullying prohibition, and 522 student sex non-discrimination. Is there anyone who wants us to consider those separately? All right, then we'll take one motion for them, and it is recommended that the school board approve the second reading of policies 514, bullying prohibition, and 522, student sex non-discrimination as presented. Do I have a motion? Moved by Mary. Is there a second? Seconded by Karen. Any other discussion beyond what we've already said? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 7-0. Okay, we're up to communications and transmittals. Anybody have any? Ann? Go, Ann.
I have two things. One is an advertisement for AMSD's Day at the Capitol, which is a week from Thursday, February 21st, from, it says 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. I think that's just the beginning of it. It's all day on the 21st. And so there are committee hearings to attend and a Senate floor session and a House floor session, Senate in the morning, House in the afternoon. And I am planning to attend, so if anyone wants to accompany me or carpool, please let me know. I'll send this down the row. And then secondly, last Friday, Nancy and I were able to, and actually Superintendent Osai and Tammy Reynolds were able to attend the Policymakers Summit at Intermediate District 287. I'm trying to pull up my notes here. Okay. And it was a very interesting day. We had there were legislators, including representatives and senators from the member districts and a couple from outside the member districts as well, including Cheryl Joachim, who is the chair of the House Education Policy Committee and is part of our district and as well as the Hopkins School District. And I think that I will just kind of say what my key takeaways were. It was about trauma-informed education and just like the importance of having a trauma lens in our education system. Not because, and I think the quote that I know Nancy really liked from the main speaker was that we shouldn't be asking our educators to be therapists, but we can ask them to be therapeutic, and we can have our classrooms be more therapeutic. And I thought that was a very interesting and useful way to think about trauma-informed education. And I think the other thing, my other takeaway that I heard that again I think applies to 287, but also our own classrooms is while we're struggling because we're asking, I think the quote is on our schools have become the front line of the children's mental health system. That's a difficult thing. But what I heard from actually a lot of teachers and practitioners in 287 that school is actually a great place to do mental health work when you have the resources to do it, because you have the time to do it. You have kids there all day, all week. And there was a social worker who works in 287 who spoke to us, and he just said he had been in private practice, and he said, think about what I can do in 40 minutes a week versus what I can do when I'm here every single day. So that was an interesting takeaway, and just a way for us to all think about what can we do to continue to support and to continue to advocate for mental health resources for our district and for the intermediate districts. And so I have some handouts that I'll just send down for you guys to look at, and if you want to take any of these, please feel free.
And I'm just going to build off of that just briefly since we were there. And part of what 287 is able to be trying out now comes with the grant and funding to try some new techniques in the classroom that we are not funded to do. And so it's a real challenge, I think, for our legislators who control the funding, and for our federal legislatures who have yet to fully fund special education. And this is not all about special education by any means, but to do a better job of funding those added needs. And we talked a bit about adverse childhood experiences that students and we all can have, and how they can impact our brain development, which in turn impacts our readiness to learn at certain stages in life. And some of those adverse childhood experiences can be a separation or a death or a move, or there are at least 9 of them, and I don't have my notes in front of me, but they're all significant and they impact kids. And part of Dr. Perry's educational point about being therapeutic but not being a therapist is where I think our best teachers are doing it anyway, and that is meeting our students where they're at, and knowing how to de-escalate an escalating student, and so that student doesn't lose the day of learning, and knowing how to form a relationship of caring. And those are sort of the starting points, and they're not, they sound simple, but they may be difficult if somebody's being challenging and they're emotionally at the moment because they don't feel safe, because what they see doesn't keep them safe, and so they're always on guard. And that's what you're trying to de-escalate with a calm and caring presence that engages the student. It's just our best practices that we try to do with our best teachers and our good teachers all the time. Anybody else? Jim?
Well, as long as we're on the topic, I had talked to Cheryl Yukiom this last week, and I was excited. She's telling me about the task force she's formed to study extra funding for mental health and how to channel the funding. So I guess I would just encourage everyone to maybe contact your legislature and support these efforts.
Okay, I think we're good. Is there a motion to adjourn? Mary quietly moved to adjourn, and Ken quietly seconded that motion. So Mary made the motion and Ken seconded it. I say for our clerk. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.